Hi everybody, this is a show and tell as part of the Digital Craft Festival that's happening this November. My name is Beth Alden and I'm CEO of New Brewery Arts in Cirencester, and I'm joined by 6 makers this afternoon, and everyone's going to talk a bit about their work and then we're going to have a bit of a chat afterwards. So the most important thing is everyone getting speaking, so I'm going to hand straight over to Jane. You want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is Jane Withers, and I work with my partner Michael Hanmer at a company called Janey Knitted Textiles. We produce knitted fabrics, which we turn into lots of different sorts of products, and also we established ourselves in 2005. So we've been going quite a few years now, and in 2013 we decided to start to make things using British wools. So we've been on quite a long journey trying to find suppliers. Back in those days, it was quite difficult. There are a lot more suppliers for British wools in the UK now. So it's getting slightly easier. But all our products are made in our studio at Beck, part of the Harley Foundation in North Nottinghamshire. We work together, there's just the 2 of us, so we produce all our knitted fabrics on hand operated knitting machines, and some are powered, but mostly it's very sort of labour intensive. Everything is made in the studio. We don't outsource any products or commission knitting, that type of thing. Our background is we both actually worked in the knitwear industry in Nottinghamshire many years ago, and that's where a lot of our experiences we've used in our little company. But we're very keen to produce artists, what would you call, sort of artist-made products. So they're not manufactured in any great quantities, very small batch production.
Jane, do you want to say a bit more about your lighting? Because we can see it behind you.
I was going to mention the lighting. It was really in 2013 when we decided to use British wool that we launched a range of lighting at a London show. And that from then on, really, the British wool really took off, and we really wanted to promote it a lot more and use British wools in everything that we did, which has been quite a challenge actually, because the wool itself is quite harsh. It's not really suitable for garments. It's quite harsh, so it tends to be used more for carpets and heavyweight products. But for lighting it's perfect because it's naturally fire retardant. It has lots of really fantastic properties. It's very resilient, washable. So for the lighting it was perfect, and we designed like a cord which is knitted on our machines, which is quite labour intensive to make. We've actually engineered it so that we can knit about 3 or 4 strands at a time on our machines, which uses the capabilities of the machines very well. Because we realised quite early on that we needed to produce quite a lot to make a lampshade, so we had to up our production. But we've done it all in-house. We don't do anything, you know, bring any things in. We like to. It's nice that we can say, well, we've made it and we've made the fabric as well. You know, it's very, very important to us that we have control of all our products.
And where can people find out more about you? What's your?
We have a couple of websites actually, but they're all janeyKnittedTextiles.co.uk or .com, where you'll see ranges of lighting and also all our other products, which range from cushions, soft furnishings, throws. There's a whole range of things that we can make with wool, which you've tried out. So it's always quite exciting to come up with new things. Well, I can make that out of wool. It's really nice to use it in all these different ways.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting to see a maker whose work spans homewares through to clothing and exciting to hear you saying about coming up with new ideas. Be great to see what's next.
Yes, what's next? I mean,
Thank you.
I've got a few. Oh, okay.
So we'll carry on round on the screen. So the next one to introduce themselves, Hayley.
Hello. So yeah, I'm Hayley Trezise, and I'm an artist. I'm embracing the art factor more so than a fashion designer. I've always had a bit of a thing about fashion design, but I make clothing, and they're unique wearable art. They're quite quirky. They're very sculptural. I didn't intend that to be sculptural, but they are, because that's just the way I see things. They're very textural. I'm really into layers, and I'm very much into, not deliberately, but turning fashion on its head. And I didn't go to art, fashion college. I went to art college, so I've kind of learned backwards probably, and I'm very pleased about that, because what mistakes or what you wouldn't use in normal fashion, I've embraced it and really brought it forward, like the stitch work, for example, is integral to my work. Yeah, and it's obviously sustainable. That's why we're all here. And for me, it's just the norm to use sustainable fabrics. So to me, it's a celebration of who I am, full stop. It's my life, it's my lifestyle. And I'm really into using waste. I've been going for about 18 years now. And as I started off with upcycling, which I still do, old garments, I've started to introduce organic fabrics, and I'm particularly into using waste. So I get offcuts from other designers. I get offcuts from British Mill, so I get their wool, and I reconstruct the fabrics with my stitch work. Actually, this is an example. So then you have sort of a cloth again, and then they've all got bumps and what have yous, and then I sculpt them together. So yeah. And I guess what you can see in the background, which I've done a little display. So here is a classic coatigan, which is a classic Raggedy item. Raggedy is my brand. And that's using upcycled and British wools and sculpting shapes together. And the reason why I have these two and this piece here that I'm wearing is my brand new pieces that I've done actually through lockdown, which has been fantastic. And because art is my background, I've been embracing to do sculpture, and my aim was to do it for the Digital Craft Festival. So these are going to be up on my website as amazing art pieces, as well as this.
Tell me a little bit more about that, and why it's got that, or how it's got that shape. Is that, well, does it come through the material or the cutting or the?
Yeah, I mean, it's sculpting, because so I create the fabric, and so it's flat as a flat piece of fabric, and then bit by bit I'm cutting it off, and that's how I do my garments anyway. I'm like rebuilding and restructuring so you can get shape, so 3-dimensional shape. And particularly this one is a garment for, it's very much about protection, because where it's covering the heart, it's covering our back of our neck, and kind of, so that's another element, I guess, of my work, which is this garment here. Yeah.
And just so that everyone knows where to find you, what's your web address? How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, my web address is hayleytrezise.co.uk. So that's HAYLEYTREZISE. And my Instagram page is a Raggedy Rags.
Great.
So,
Thank you. Katy. So you're on mute. So there we go. Go for it.
Gillam-Hull. I am an artist and maker of historically inspired kind of jewellery and objects. And although I'm jewellery at the Digital Craft Festival, I also make kind of art objects for museums or exhibits. Speaking of the jewellery, I'm wearing some now. It's quite small, so you can't quite tell, but I have a helpful aid. So these are historically kind of fashioned, almost semi-antiques, but they are contemporary. These are all made in sterling silver, but I really like working with patinas that make them look a bit aged. So this one, some of them with kind of darker, more textured surfaces, and you don't really see the details on them until you handle them, and they've got kind of marks on them. Or I add in pearls as well, which you can kind of see here. So they give the impression of being something kind of treasured and antique, but they're actually new. And that's all come about from like lots of research over years of particularly like 17th and 18th century jewellery for a large project I made for an exhibition that hopefully will happen. But out of that came the collection of jewellery, which happened in lockdown. And it was been really nice to have a way to show it with the Digital Craft Festival. Yeah, all of it's on sterling silver as well.
Right, so I was going to ask you how people can find out more about you and can kind of see images of your work.
Yes, so my name is Katy Gillam-Hull, and my website is exactly the same, and so is my Instagram. That's Katy with a Y, in case you're struggling to find it.
And when we've spoken earlier, you've talked a little bit more about sourcing materials.
Yes, I'm costume change. Bear with me. I forgot to mention this. Thank you for reminding me. So this is actually representative of another part of my work, is when I make with found objects as well. I like to add something to that element of the historical. And this one in particular, which is exclusive for this Christmas, this is made with mudlarked. It's a pipe, a clay pipe with a piece of hand-worked silver. It's much better on the website, but I really enjoy finding along the River Thames, shorelines everywhere, archives, antique stalls, and making the most of them.
So I know we'll be talking a bit more about materials and sourcing materials later, so we'll come back and find out a bit more about all of that kind of stuff once we've all finished talking about ourselves. So so thank you, Katy. Anya, you're up next.
Hello, I'm Anya, Anya Keeley, and my website is anyakeeley.com, and you can find all sorts of things on there. I describe myself as a curiosity maker because I think play is very important in life in general, but I suppose my main skill is I'm a wire worker, and I combine the wire working with found, vintage and reclaimed materials. I just prefer the idea of using something that would go to landfill and trying to give it a second life or a third life or a fourth life, whatever it is, before it then moves on. So I have sort of two ranges of things. I'm known for my creatures, so I have some here. So I do anthropomorphic creatures, which just means I give them names and give them human characteristics. So under this is a wire frame. This is vintage paper, book papers and fabrics and things. And I've started a new range, which I'm going to sort of launch at the Digital Craft Festival, which this is also a wireframe, but I've started to use naturally dyed fabrics. There's so a lot of these fabrics I found in charity shops and naturally dyed. So that's a new range. But I also studied a master's 2 years ago, and so I have another sideline of what I'm doing with found objects and all those sort of materials that I like, and I make these artifacts. So I was looking at things particularly hand-sized, and what I'm interested in is collecting materials, so whether it's found materials or going to secondhand shops, protecting. So I'm looking at food waste. This is actually made from a lemon, so it's a lemon skin. I use the lemon itself and then create something, and just assembling them into little objects. So for the masters itself, these objects were wall hung or on a table, but I've started making them into more adornments because I've continued my research, and a lot of that is to do with wearing things and being able to hold and handle stuff.
So the pieces behind you, are they some of those artifacts? There's a case, yeah.
These boards, these are pieces that I've started. They're half made, so I've been looking at doing webs and things. So I suppose that's probably the easiest one to see, is that this wire here, and it's based on an old traditional technique called making a Dorset wheel, or a Dorset button. So it's using a ring, and then you sort of hand weave it to create a button that you could attach to things. So I sort of moved that on as far as I could, and tried to look at it more as weaving like a web and that sort of. So these are pieces that are waiting to go into things. So they're there in my view line, so that when I find the right object, I can just go, ooh, yes.
Everybody has a bit of that in their studio, don't they? The thing that hasn't quite made it into a thing, but you know it will do one day.
Yeah, I have a lot of that.
Great, thank you, Anya. Alysa, over to you.
Hiya, my name is Alysa Freeman, and I am a non-precious jewellery maker. I say that slightly because I don't make things out of stones or gold, but I make jewellery out of recycled compressed newspaper. So this is a process that I developed whilst studying a master's, which I completed about 18 months ago now. So I studied originally in metalwork many years ago, and I left those studies feeling quite disconnected from the concept of using metal simply from my kind of environmental outlook, and couldn't really throw myself into like establishing a practice comfortably. And quite a long time went past, and then I found a master's, and I was like, I need to go and try this again, because I knew I didn't want to stop creating, but I wasn't quite sure how to do it. So I developed this practice over a 3-year period. I was doing my master's part-time, and I just was looking at paper as a way of creating a new material. And I had no idea at the beginning how this was going to end up, but I kind of knew that that's where I was going to go with it. And so it's basically a lamination process that I developed, and it takes hours to build basically blocks. So they look like this kind of thing. They vary in thickness and size depending on what paper I'm using and my mood, really. And then from this, they're quite wet. They take between a month and 2 months to dry completely. And then at that point, I can start figuring out what I'm going to do with them and how they're going to become something that's wearable. And I can relate to the wall of things waiting to go somewhere behind you, because I have a box of dried bits, stacks, I call them, dried stacks, waiting to know what they will become. And it really, they wait there until I'm ready. So I've had some that are sat there for 18 months and some that dry instantly, and I'm like, I know where you're going or what you're going to be. So I am wearing a pair of my earrings. Well, I'm wearing one and I'm holding the other for you. So this is the kind of thing that I make, and I sand back the surface with very fine paper to create a very kind of blurred, you can't tell what the text says. It becomes anonymous, and that's kind of relates to how I feel about text as a dyslexic artist as well. So there's two kind of elements to my work, which is the sourcing of a sustainable material, and then the using text in an ulterior or like in an alternate way that doesn't really have the relevance that it did before. So it's yeah, two branches but brought together in compressed paper.
You were saying when we spoke earlier about the difference of paper as a source material to something like metal, which is heavier. So there was a lightness and then something around scale that you were talking about.
Absolutely. So I can wear these pair of earrings, which are quite sizey, all day, and they don't have an impact on the body in the way that something made out of metal would be. So my findings that I use are sterling silver, they're eco silver, so they are 100% recycled silver, but I use as minimal amount as possible. And that just means that you can wear really big pieces and be kind of quite in your face with it without it really kind of having an effect on you. So this is one of my necklace pieces. So it's quite sizey, and if that was in a solid metal, you'd really know about it. Whereas when I'm wearing this, I can, you know, I can wear it all day, and it's there, but it's not impacting my daily routine.
And the final question that I've asked everyone is, where can people go to find out more about you? What's your website?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a website, which is just alysafreeman.co.uk, and that's ALYSA, which most people struggle with. So, or you can find me on Instagram, and it's just AJP Freeman. And I'm in the process of getting my shop online with my website, and that's definitely thanks to the Digital Craft Festival for giving me a kick in the right direction with getting myself actually selling online for the first time, which is really exciting.
Fab, thank you. So Becky, over to you.
Hello. So yeah, I am Beck Pryor. My business is Priormade, which is spelled PRIORMADE, and you can find me at priormade.store is my website. And I make sort of bold, contemporary, eye-catching homewares and jewellery. But everything I do is as responsibly made as possible, right from the design stage. I make sure I use sustainable materials, and every decision that I make in the process, I just try and be as responsible as possible. So I make these, which are sort of geometric wooden planters with a cute little size that goes with it. I also make these lamps, which is like an upgrade from the the little planters. I also make inner tube earrings, which I don't know if you can see there. And I include on the with the packaging how the inner tube popped, where it popped, and its last journey. I also make wooden earrings. If you can see these, see those? And these are all offcuts with history. So I go to wood recycling centres and reclamation yards, and I also include the story of the provenance of that wood. So those earrings, they were Weston-super-Mare's Grand Pier that burnt down in the fire, and so they were reclaimed by so there's like I've got 18th century ship hatch, Battersea Power Station's roof, lots and lots of stories. And I'm a real stickler for detail. So for me, sustainability is not just about the materials and the choices I make to be more environmentally friendly. It's also about how well I make them, because obviously mine are homewares, and I finish them with such a painfully time-consuming quality so that they're made to last, and that they're treasured, I suppose, as for as long as that I love them. What else to tell you? I've also got a shop in Bristol called Prior Shop, and that's 32 other makers who all share the same sort of ethos as me. So it's all contemporary work, finished to an amazing quality, mainly homewares and mainly functional. So again, it has that sort of long-lasting element. And then my shop website is priorshop.uk.
Thank you. So we had a little bit of a pre-chat about lots of things, and one thing that I wanted to ask you all about, because it seems to resonate with all of your work is so you're all being, or you're all taking pains to be sustainable or responsible with your materials. But what that means is that your materials, you've made it really difficult for yourselves to get hold of materials. So I don't know if anyone wants to talk about some of the lengths you go to find your materials, or to get just the right materials. So I know Beck's just mentioned about finding things with a bit of history, but I know we've got a couple of mudlarkers on screen, so maybe, you know, tell me a bit more about how you get hold of the stuff and the adventures and the lengths you go to. Anya, do you want to say a bit about
it? Yeah, well, I've always mudlarked. I didn't know it was called mudlarking until I started my masters and I started researching it properly. But since
you quickly want to explain what mudlarking is? Everyone.
It's actually a term. I think it's Victorian. It could be 18th century. It's a term used to describe children in particular who used to go onto the Thames foreshore into the thick mud and try and collect things that had been dropped overboard or lost by people going on the ferry, so pennies or coins or whatever, bits of coal and things like that, and then they would try to sell those. So they were scavengers basically. But mudlarking is specific to the Thames, but it's now known as, I suppose it's the equivalent of beachcombing, but on rivers, which was probably a lot easier way of saying it.
But so when you're going out and sourcing materials in that way, I mean, how much stuff can you collect on a good day or on a bad day? And I suppose what I'm trying to get to is that it's not guaranteed, is it, that you're going to find anything of use?
No, it's not guaranteed. You can, you know, people always ask, oh, what are you going looking for? It's like, you can't think of it as looking for anything in particular. You look for whatever you can find. And sometimes I come home with a little pot full of pieces. Sometimes it's a bag's worth. But I actually only pick up what I know straight away that I'm going to use. When I was a child, it would have been I would have picked up everything I could have got my hold of, but I'm far more selective now, because otherwise it's just a waste. It's just, and I do have 20 odd years worth of things that I've collected specifically for making in my shed, so I don't really need huge amount more.
And Katy, you also source things in that way?
Yes, I was going to say you're a stronger person than I am, because I've learnt to leave things behind. But I always tell myself that I can live with the found object for a while, and if I don't use it, I can always give it back to the river. So I mudlark as well, but I mudlarked before I knew what mudlarking was too. In fact, my favourite place to find things is on a shore, but not in this country. So every time I want to go there, I do have to fly to Norway, which is making life extremely hard for myself to make work. But that was my whole degree project, was just these things I got obsessed with that I could find on shorelines in another country, and then moved to London and realised mudlarking was a thing. But it is, you can't rely on it, you're right. I once tried to find something. I went out that day going, I shall find a Victorian particular kind of glass bottle. No, I couldn't find anything like that, not at all. And you just can't do that. But it's interesting, because that challenge is often where you make interesting work, where you've had a piece for 2 years, or in my case, many years, and you come back to it. and it sort of speaks to you again, or you find a new way to work with it, or maybe the work you were doing then didn't suit that found object, but in 3 you've changed what you're doing. And so it's not easy, but I think it makes more interesting work.
And Hayley, do you want to talk about sourcing the materials that you use? Where do you find your
Well, like I said before, it was using old garments, so charity shops is the classic one, and also people would give me garments as well, or they still do, you know, particularly if they want a garment to be reconstructed into a Raggedy item. But so charity shops. But then as time kind of went on, actually I get my organic fabrics from somewhere in Wales, which is fantastic. And then, for example, one time there was a t-shirt company in my studio in Freeman. There was an ethical t-shirt company just below, and she just came up, knocked on my door, and she said, dumped it on the floor, this massive box of t-shirts. She said, I can't use these because I can't sell them, I can't put them in charity shops because they were misprints. She said, can you do anything with it? And I'd never done anything with t-shirts before, or, you know, jersey fabric, but of course it was totally inspiring. I like picked it up and thought, what can I do with it, what can I do? And I actually, what that box ended up doing, so I have got a range called Bubbles, which is from that, so it's creating loads of texture and really bubbling it up. But what was great is that I made an art piece, and it was this massive dress with huge train that went out, and it was to represent sustainability. So and then you know, a pile of these t-shirts that she gave to me just piled up neatly on the side to show that transition, you know. So you know, like what a couple of you already said, you know, it's inspiring and you hold on to things, and it's the kind of the things that are given to you, or the things that you didn't expect actually are probably the most inspiring. Yeah. And then I get offcuts from other designers, so she bags up these tiny little pieces as well as bigger pieces. And again, it was, you know, her idea. She said, can you do anything with this? And it's come up to a range. I have a range with that now, my fragment range. So yeah.
And Jane, you were saying about your source material, you made a conscious decision to only use British wool, but actually you were also saying British wool didn't lend itself to certain things. So
That's
you
right.
you know, in a way you'd set yourself a difficult task,
Yeah,
because of the constraints of the material, in a way that you had to respond to. Like, if other people are saying they're responding to things that they got given, you had to respond to the criteria of your material.
yes, it was slightly different for us than just finding a material that was suitable. With the British wool, I did feel at the time that it was being very underused in a very sort of, I wanted to use it in a contemporary way rather than, I don't know, I needed to find something new, a new way of using it rather than, say, produce more fabric. So that's why we developed this cord and put it onto a metal frame to create a sort of sculpture, obviously lampshades and lighting, which took it into a totally new sort of area. It was difficult to find suppliers actually at the time, but as I mentioned earlier, it's getting a lot easier now. There are a lot more smaller suppliers of rare sheep breeds wools, which we mainly use Cheviot, which is actually quite a common wool, but then others are in much shorter supply. So in the sort of detail of things, although we might say we're producing a lampshade with Luftan wool, which comes from the Isle of Man, it's actually going to be slightly different each time we make that lampshade, because the wool varies and the blend will vary very slightly. So although to the customer probably wouldn't notice it very much, we are very sort of detailed in everything that we do, with the mergers and all the different counts of wool. It's quite important that we use a certain count for our machines, and we experiment a lot actually, which people don't see. I mean, some of the cord here, this is what we do with it. We put it into hanks when we've knitted it, and then we wind it. So there's lots of processes involved. So it has to be the right sort of thickness. So each type of wool that we use could produce a different type of cord. So it tends to get very experimental. So we have lots of different types of thicknesses of yarns, which are made in counts of yarn. So, you know, we can make, it's quite difficult to relay to the customer the actual thicknesses, you know, so we have to sort of line it.
Yeah, when we were talking before, you were talking about the dyes that you use.
Oh yes,
and trying to, so, you know, when lots of people have been talking about found materials or upcycled materials, or even kind of making a new material, like working with the paper, but not knowing how that's quite going to turn out. But you were saying customers can be quite demanding in terms of, especially shopping online, and they see a thing and they want it to look exactly like that. But within the practice of making, I think we all know that sometimes things come out differently, colours don't always stay the same. In terms of your material, Jane, how do you balance what the customer wants with the intrinsic non-uniformity of the wool and the materials?
What tends to happen is that we probably have fairly sort of limited amounts of a particular style that we'll make, and then we'll move on to something else in another colour. But with the, when I mentioned before, with the dip dyeing, there's one I'll show you that, which is dip dyed. We did a lot of experimentation in the early days with sort of very sort of basic dyes, powder dyes in cold water, because we didn't want to use hot water dyes because they are more toxic. Some of the powder dyes are very toxic as well, but now we've refined it. So we have found some suppliers of very non-toxic dyes that we can use safely, that can be disposed of very safely. So we've tried to sort of, it takes quite a long time to develop these things. And we have a sort of a strong ethos really to produce things that are responsible. And as time's going on, our supplies are the same. We're not finding it as difficult as it was because our suppliers are responding, and they're being responsible themselves. So they're really helping us out. So we're passing that on to the customer.
But there's definitely something around, in all of your endeavours to be more responsible or sustainable, it takes more of your time. And I think, Alysa, you're probably somebody to talk to about choosing to work with a material that takes way, I mean, you could order something online that comes as a big sheet and you could cut lots of stuff out and make loads. What is it that that drives you to be so difficult for yourself in this kind of cause of making and creating? And
yeah, absolutely. So I've always been very environmentally friendly orientated. I was kind of brought up in a household that recycled, you know, when you have to drive everything to a supermarket to recycle it. So I've always kind of had that ethos of looking after what you've got and not throwing things away for the sake of it. I'm not a fast fashion person. I want things that are quality made and last for a long time. And for me, the process of working with paper was, so I mostly work with just newspapers, and I only work with papers that I am given. I don't buy any of them. I have now refined that down to a number of newspapers which have better quality paper, which make better stacks and make nicer work. So yeah, there's 2 papers that I am given, which are my favorites. But ultimately they're someone else's rubbish. And by spending some time, and this is kind of how it's only my time, like that's all it takes to take something that was literally rubbish to try and make it into something that has value again. And the glues that I use are not harmful, and they don't plasticize it, you know, it's not an acrylic. So my work will be looked after and cared for as long as the owner wants it to, and after that, if they deem it to be rubbish again, it will go back to being rubbish again. And that's, I'm okay with that as a concept. It's about responsible ownership. And yeah, that's what kind of drives me on my endless hours of laminating pieces of paper together and then waiting months for them to dry, and then the process back down of sanding, carving, shaping them is very time consuming. But in the same sense that you have a stone which is considered precious because it is rarer or harder to find, that's kind of how I view it. It's taken me a lot of time to try and create this new material, and if the viewer, the owner, whoever views that as precious, then it is as precious to them as it is to me. And if it's not, then I kind of accept that. That's fine. We operate on a different scale, and that's okay.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I think I might ask Beck this question, which is around people appreciating that and appreciating the time and the work that it goes in adapting something that is already existing, and whether, do you find that people go, well, why does this cost more because it's made out of recycled or salvaged materials? Why is that? You know, surely aren't you getting your materials for free, or for, you know, how do you justify that to customers? Because I think that's something that people sort of mix up in their minds. We've talked about the time it takes.
Yeah, I think what we've all been saying, isn't it, that we can never please everyone, especially with online selling now, where you haven't got that chance to really convey to your customer and introduce your work as you would when you are in person at a market, where you can show them the textures and the stitches or the fine details that photography, even with professional photography, you can't quite get. And also people want to buy what's in the photo, even if you say there's a variation, or, you know, these are handmade, they're individually made, you mix the paint up, you know, blah blah blah. I think with everything online, especially, I mean, now people still have an expectation that they're going to get close to the photo, and I think when I started my business, I always used recycled materials, always. But what I was finding as my business grew and I was in more retail shops, the need for similar items was getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And it got to a point where I couldn't grow. So I ended up using to cover sort of, to get over that, I suppose, was how can I develop and grow my business, but still keeping my, you know, core values of being responsible as possible and not designing something that's going to be, you know, irresponsible. So now I do buy sheets of plywood, but it's eco plywood, and I found a company that give me a chain of custody certificate, so I know exactly how it got into the UK, where it was grown. I use like water-based, non-toxic glue to laminate it together. So I think it's, I think the conversation about that is ongoing, always. My mum will laugh at me if she watches this, but my mum obviously knows completely about my business, all the ins and outs, but yet she will still receive something in the post that she knows is handmade and knows is a one-off, and will still go, oh, it's not the same, you know? So I think it's, not the same as the photo. So yeah, I think if you're going to be a brand in the sustainable sector, I think it's a conversation you're always going to have with your customers about how long it takes and why it costs that much and so on. But also, sorry, I'm waffling on now, but I think what's been amazing about this year is everyone was already leaning towards buying local, independent and sustainable. And this has really catapulted it, I think. And people are far more interested in knowing how things are made, what the source material is, whose hands made that. So I think the discussion is a lot more open now, which is amazing.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I guess it sort of brings the conversation sort of back almost, you know, to a good place to end, but it's around, it's Christmas shopping, isn't it? You know, we're now, with the Digital Craft Festival being at the end of November, everybody is gearing up for Christmas. And we were having a conversation here at home, and I just said that what I really don't want is for my sister-in-law is to click on Amazon and buy me something. You know, that's the least generous way to give someone a gift, literally no thought. And so I think something like the Digital Craft Festival, which hopefully will encourage people to buy handmade, to talk to all of you guys and to meet you all and to find out the time it takes, why you work this hard for the things that you're making, and to really appreciate that. And I would really hope that this Christmas people are making a choice, because we are all moving online, and this Digital Craft Festival is a perfect example of how makers had to make that shift online this year. Hopefully people can buy online, but it doesn't have to be Amazon, and it doesn't have to be faceless, and it can be responsible and have a story behind it. So if we probably wrap it up now, but what I'll do is maybe we'll go round again, and if there's something that you think that people should know about craft or about your work, or just something you want to add, we go round. I think that would be fab. So if we go round in the same order that we introduced with. So Jane, is there one thing that you would like people to know?
I'd just like people to know that everything that we make is made in our studio in Beck. We work very hard, we work long hours here, but everything is created here.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Hayley?
Basically, the garments I produce are impeccable about the detail. And yeah, I'd love to chat, you know, connect. Don't be afraid to connect with me, because I'm always up for chatting.
That's great.
Like more about my stuff.
Good. Or anything.
General chat, fine.
Katy, what would you like people to know?
I'm with you there, Hayley. I'm always open for a chat about the work, because there's always a story behind handmade items like this. There's work, and I'm always happy to talk about the inspiration behind them. But also that anything handmade with as much care as we all put in is going to have so much more value and have such a longer life, and therefore already be like that step towards sustainability that we're all so passionate about. Yeah.
And in terms of how people can have a chat with you, I mean, we've done this on Zoom, but I think these days
through my website and through Instagram, and if anyone doesn't like it, they can always just email me, do a Zoom call like this. I'm always happy to have a chat.
Great. Anya?
I don't know. Everybody said things already, which I would probably add too. Yeah, I'd like people to know that it's me and me alone. So not only am I the collector of materials and the maker, but I do all my photography and I design and build my own website. You know, I'm sure this is what everybody does here. All these
makers. I think it's absolutely worth telling people, because because I don't think people maybe think about the whole process, and it is you alone in a shed or a studio or a kitchen table, and all of this is you. It's really worth saying.
Yeah. So yeah, that's probably all I'd say.
Alysa?
Yeah, I think so. I was lucky enough to do some of the physical craft festivals last year, and I just met some like incredible people who I'm still in contact with and who just make such beautiful things, and lots of them are taking part over the weekend. And it's really lovely to be part of the British craft scene and to be connecting with so many makers of so many wonderful things, and it's just a real opportunity to kind of like hold each other up, I think, and I think that's super important. And you know, I take a lot of care over my work, and I don't think I've met anyone through any of the craft festivals that I've done who doesn't just care about their work more than, you know, we'll be putting up our stands and covered in paint, and you know, you haven't eaten or drank anything all day, but you know, you've got your box of precious things, and everyone is like, they all care about that too. And I think that's, you know, I'm just so pleased to be part of what we're doing here today, really.
Yeah, I think really well said. I think that care, and that comes across in all of you actually. You've all spoken about the care, and there is something crazy about craft and how we all go above and beyond what people assume in the background. So yeah, really well said. And Beck, what would you say?
Well, like everybody else, I mean, I could combine everyone's final words to mine. But yeah, I suppose it's another good thing about this year is to be able to do this, these actually meeting the makers and having time at these events to peruse everyone's beautiful works that have been made with intent, you know, because on a market, like you were saying, that it's we're manic, we're absolutely manic at events, desperately trying to make sure that our display showcases, you know, all the work that we've put into it, that we very rarely get the chance to actually speak to one another. Maybe to, you know, man the stall to go for a wee, but I mean, that's about it. So yeah, I'm really excited. I've met so many people this year through these kind of events. Yeah, that's it. Oh, there's one thing I forgot to say about my work. Back to me, sorry. Is all my lamps and pots, there's 17 colours to choose from. For some reason I forgot. I didn't say that. But thank you for hosting this, Beth.
No, thank you. And I just want to say to you all, yeah, thank you for your time and for chatting. It's been really lovely to meet you all. And I hope you have a really great festival, and I hope you have a really great Christmas and have loads of wonderful sales and just a wonderful time. And I hope that 2021 is a whole other year and we can put this one to bed. But yeah, no, it's been wonderful talking to you, and actually things like this that have come out of it, that now we can talk completely countrywide, and you know, and we haven't had to drive, we haven't had to do all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of things that we've lost this year, but there's also things that we found. So in the whole nature actually of, you know, sourcing things and making it difficult for ourselves, 2020 has been very difficult for ourselves, but I think we saw some new stuff as well. So great. But thank you very much. And yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.